Welcome to How I Grew This, where we dive into the world of digital marketing and connect with leaders in the space about how they're scaling, evolving, and growing. Hey everybody, Amanda here. We had some really great conversations on how I grew this in 2025 across growth, product, leadership, and the very real impact AI is having on how teams build and market. So today we're doing something a little fun, a little different. It's a compilation episode of some of our favorite moments because a theme kept showing up across totally different conversations last year. The fundamentals still win, and the difference maker is clarity. Clarity on what you measure, what you prioritize, and the principles that keep you from getting pulled into the noise. So let's dig into it. First up, Shumel on subscription apps, because before you scale, you need clarity on what you're measuring, what your funnel actually looks like, and whether the economics make sense.
Well, I want to double click on that for a second, Shumel. If I'm starting a subscription app, what are kind of the things I need to get in order to be able to get that going? So pretend like you're telling someone, at dinner that is starting an app. What do they need to figure out how to get started?
Yes, I'd say early on, let's assume, you've got your idea or your offer, you've built an app providing some kind of subscription service. Conversation I have with a lot of really early stage folks, and these are folks that are just starting out, maybe have spent some money on growth or paid user acquisition or even kind of pre that side of things as well. And the first thing is always around getting your analytics and tracking and events in order. So that's kind of the first piece. So the more behavioral data that you can track early on, the better it's going to be to uncover trends as well. So I think that's usually the first thing in helping people get set up with the right events to tag. So if you think of being able to see like a full funnel of how a user goes from opening the app all the way to how they interact in terms of registering and actually engaging a bit using the app. So that's one aspect, but then being able to split that into how that differs if they're coming on different plans, for example. Someone who's on like a weekly subscription plan will behave quite differently to someone who's on an annual plan, as an example. So that's usually my first advice, is just ensuring we've got as much visibility on what's happening. And then the other one is starting to think a little bit about unit economics as well. And that's one thing I've found with really early stage folks. And some of this is down to like how constrained cash flow could be if it's a business who's just gone a new business, but that's just about to raise some funding, or maybe they don't have that kind of cash flow to fund. And just understanding this concept of like payback period, CAC and LTV, these are all pretty fundamental metrics to be aware of. And what we find typically with the really early stage folks is they are looking to kind of recoup their investment almost immediately, which makes sense if they're a bit more cash constrained, but then they're kind of comparing themselves to the much bigger apps in the ecosystem. And the way they're able to grow so quickly is they're willing to accept that, okay, it's going to take us 6 months to recoup our investment on user acquisition. So I think it's just understanding those aspects and kind of modeling out what growth looks like and being realistic about how you'd go about that. So those are a couple of things I would say. And maybe the third piece is, there's a notion of like, in an ideal world, you'd have the perfect funnel, you'd have, all your conversion rates optimized, but that's where it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation where you need some initial data to form your benchmarks. So that's where sometimes, just depending on your app, just getting some traffic through, sometimes paid is the quickest, but it is also expensive, so depending on your situation, but just trying to get enough users in on a consistent basis then allows you to do that optimization on tweaking the funnel and so on.
Shumel's basically saying don't fly blind. Get your tracking right, get your benchmarks, and be realistic about payback. But what's interesting is, in AI search, this world that we're in, you kind of are flying blind a little bit right now. So the game becomes, what's the most reliable signal you can anchor to, even if it's imperfect? Jason's answer is super actionable here.
You mentioned attribution, and when we first met, you dropped a hint that I kind of lit on and started doing research. Can you share a little bit about how you're measuring the LLM outputs?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways. I haven't seen a good analytic tool yet. Rest in peace, my LinkedIn inbox after this, but they're not great from what I've seen. I have a couple of different dashboards that I've used from other companies. I think Sear Interactive out of Philly has some like really great AI content and search and like, how to get yourself indexed. And the dashboards are nice. GA4 gives you some things, but like the whole Google AI ecosystem, you can't pull any data out of it really. And so like I've always, your server logs are going to be your most accurate point of truth. Anything that pings for your website is going to be recorded on that log file. And so analyzing and understanding what bots are coming and how often they're coming and what pieces of content they're consuming matter a lot. And in the case of AI, it's going to be your most accurate source for understanding what kind of visibility you might be getting on a ChatGPT, what kind of traffic you might be getting from Perplexity or something like that. And even if like you're selling products on ChatGPT, which some brands are able to do right now.
So just to highlight that, you're saying that ChatGPT will ping your website to include a search. And that's what I went off and looked at was when it trains, that's like once every year or 2 years or something. But it has a
It's
bot,
more often
ChatGPT bot.
Yeah, there's 4 bots. And one of them is the LLM training bot. And you can see that come to your website multiple times a day or multiple times a week and pull down some pretty big log files, pretty big like amounts of requests and training data and things that it's analyzing. But then there's just a regular like ChatGPT bot too. And there's a couple of different versions of that I've seen. So there's actually like a lot more than 4. And then they have like a weird like ads product bot, I think too. There's a total of 4. You can Google it and like find all the ChatGPT bots and kind of understand what they do. But the LLM is much different than the GPT bot. And you kind of want to understand how often the LLM is consuming your content and your data, and if you're efficiently giving it the right information. And then that GPT bot is kind of going to be a little bit more of like an analytics goose, perhaps, where it could be a share of voice metric that you kind of make up, but it's better than anything else that's out there. You could kind of use it as a compression share. You could also understand what kind of pages are being used to give the answer. A lot of times we'll see that there's like 4 or 5 pages that get referenced in one answer. And so that makes that content really, really important. A lot of people have already made this content investment. And so you can make really good decisions on how to better utilize your content based off of what you're seeing in the answers and how ChatGPT is pinging your server logs.
So Jason's point is really clarity over comfort. The clean dashboards aren't always where the truth is, so you go find the best proxy and you stay consistent. And honestly, that's a good mindset for building with AI too, because yes, AI can speed things up, but you still need judgment around what's real, what's risky, and what actually holds up once it's in the wild. Robert had a great take on where vibe coding fits and where it doesn't.
I am particularly interested in some of the trends that you're seeing or some of the things you believe in or kind of your inside scoop. Do you think people are going to just be able to start vibe coding to make their own apps? Or what are we looking at here?
Certainly, this is a question I get probably twice a day. So certainly AI is extremely popular. I certainly think that there's been technology trends in the past that have kind of come and gone, but I do think that AI is certainly here to stay. I do think that vibe coding kind of has its time and place. I think it's really good for building an early proof of concept from scratch. I think it's really good at building something rudimentary. And so certainly it's good at certain things. I think with some of the work that we're doing where we'll come in and, for example, inherit a very large code base that may be a little bit older and we're maintaining and supporting and updating that for a client, it's not going to be a good use case there. Like I mentioned, some of the big verticals we work in with fintech and healthcare, there's certainly some security concerns with
Totally.
that. And so there's certainly some good use cases for vibe coding. That's not something that we do. We do use AI internally to help our engineers be more efficient. We looked at this a couple years ago and standardized on Microsoft Copilot. And so we use that across the board for all of our engineers to, again, to help facilitate and speed them up. And that certainly gives us some efficiencies. AI as a whole has certainly brought us a whole new, I guess, service base or book of business where we're building AI apps for our clients. And so we're working on a number of AI projects right now. And those clients, just as the more work we do, the more opportunities they see to be able to provide efficiencies or streamline business operations and things like this. So we're working with the large mortgage company to help them with kind of their underwriting process. And so, yeah, AI is huge. And again, something that we're continuing to try to hire, talented AI and machine learning engineers to the team.
Which brings us to leadership. When the tools are changing fast and everyone's moving quickly, clarity becomes a management superpower. Clarity on the mission and clarity on what actually matters this week. Patrick had one of my favorite frameworks for that.
And speaking about, being in a leadership role, how do you inspire your teams to stay curious, to overcome resourcing challenges or regulatory challenges or data challenges or whatever it may be?
I think to start, I really always encourage folks, like in challenging situations, to remember the mission, who we are building for and why we are building. I think there are times when during tough discussions, people might say, well, I don't want to do that. And we have to remind people that we're here not to satisfy ourselves, but to build for an end user, a community, an industry, to really make a difference. And I think that setting that and resetting that regularly, I think definitely help. I think also in challenging times, sometimes part of the challenge is that people are focusing on too many things. So they're focusing on nothing. So if they are focusing on too many things, so really encouraging laser focus and helping them unfocus on things that are not as important, but their brain is kind of tricking them to tell them is important. I think from a curiosity perspective is really encouraging people to take that time to disconnect and to go to that conference, to read up on that thing. I think creating space for creativity within the workplace is also super important. So finding that time for hackathons or a design jam or a design challenge is easier to carve out than people think.
Wow, I really love that advice. So true. And having just come off of a conference, I'm like, yeah, I was energized and I am now. So love that for sure. And yes, if everything's a priority, nothing is a priority. So that's good advice as well. Adam, any other things you want to dig into Patrick with?
Just going back to the engineering question. So you kind of answered this, but I'm going to get you to be a little bit more specific. So you have an engineering background, you can code. How important is that to be a good technical product manager? Or can you just satisfy that with your curiosity, being able to sit down and figure it out?
That's a tough question because it depends on the person. Some folks can consume technical information easier than others. It's easier for me because I have that engineering background. I think that, one way if those concepts just really, really daunt you. And so for instance, a lot of people get into product via marketing, right? And often right. Some marketers are technical, some are not, but often people get into marketing that are more on the creative side. I've worked with PMs to send them to a course at a General Assembly or other places where they could understand kind of the technical foundations of things and understand cloud infrastructure and understand event-based systems. I have encouraged it and then made sure that we sponsored their ability to get that foundation is also another method.
So if you have the willingness, you can make it work.
Exactly.
Patrick also said something that shows up everywhere. If you're focused on too many things, you're basically focusing on nothing. And that's not just a team problem, it's a business problem. At some point, you have to be clear about what you're willing to do and what you're not. Mick has one of my favorite perspectives on saying no and why it can actually make you stronger.
So if someone asks you to do something you're not an expert at, do you regularly and comfortably say no?
Yeah.
What are some examples
Absolutely.
of things that you won't? Someone says, look, you're great, I love it, come do my UA, or something you're not an expert at.
Yeah, I think there's something really powerful in the ability to say no. I think it strengthens the individual, it strengthens the business, and it allows you to focus on what you do want to do. So as an example, we have clients and we won't work with gambling and gaming businesses. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just not something that I feel that we want to be promoting. And therefore, we say no to those kind of businesses that come through the door in a very nice and polite way. Saying no to buying digital, whereas we're buying mobile, for instance, they're the kind of areas that, we will double down with. I think also it empowers the people beyond myself in the business. I think they feel they're in a business that genuinely wants to do the right thing and won't necessarily chase the money. They're chasing the right kind of clients and doing it in the right kind of way. And I think it builds up a strength and trust with those individuals that you're working with to follow you into, the spaces, the places, the challenges that you want to go, and work with the clients that we want to bring on board.
Very authentic way to approach things.
It is, but it's also a place of luxury to say no. Like, you have to be a healthy business. You have to have the revenue coming in. So how do you balance that, not needing to chase the money? How are you getting clients generally?
So I'll answer the first question initially. And that is one of the strengths, I think, about our business, and it can apply to a lot of businesses, is just growing at the right kind of speed. So yes, those first few years, those formative years are the biggest challenge, because, you've got to make sure you've got the cash flow. You've got to make sure that you can pay your bills, you pay your suppliers, and you pay your staff before you pay you. So I suppose if you're true to your principles, then, you make sure that you're doing the right thing by everybody else, and you're still managing to tick over, because, if you don't have a business after 2 years, you've failed and you've stuck to your principles, but what's the point of that? So those challenging first few years are by far the most difficult that any business that wants to follow the process that I followed, which is growing slowly. You grow slowly because that allows you not to have to do the things that you don't necessarily want to do. It allows you to deliver, I think, the best quality of service that you want to provide in the areas you want to provide, and work with those clients you want to work with. So, not having the dollar signs in your eyes from day one, just making sure that you are able to grow, not make a loss. And then when you get to certain key points of your growth, you're able then to expand, bring more people in. I think one of the principles we've been very, very good at is retaining people. And because we're in a specialist area, the skill sets that our guys have got and have grown through the business and learned are valuable, very valuable, but they're very specialist. Now, what we don't want to do is get to a position where somebody's been with us 4, 5, 6 years, they're arguably in a director position and they leave. So having the right kind of principles and the values, I think, have helped retain an awful lot of the right kind of people within our business. And what that's allowed us to do is pass down those skill sets from somebody that started as, as a junior and then became a manager and a director. That director's now training managers who are now training juniors, and those skills are getting passed on. So we're very, very good at keeping that experience in-house, and that's allowed us to grow at the pace that we want to go, but also retain the kind of skills and specialisms that we as a business absolutely value and our clients value.
What I love about Mick's take is it's not values as vibes, it's values as an operating system. Saying no is how you protect quality and focus. And that idea carries straight into collaboration too, because once you're clear on the work, the next battle is how teams work together, especially around creative, where feedback can get a little emotional fast. Lindiwe has great advice on not being precious and using guardrails to keep things moving.
Can you tell me a little bit about how your design background shows up in your work, or how it kind of leads to any superpowers that have led you to where you are today?
I would say I've learned not to be precious about things. So when I was a designer, it was very easy to feel hurt when someone didn't like that I used red instead of green.
I personally attached to your design.
Yeah, because your taste is involved, right? It's like, you don't like my wallpaper.
Project.
Yeah. You want me to move that 5 pixels to the right? That's awful. So I think I've learned that because you always have a POV on things, right? You like things a certain way. You want to use a certain software. You want to talk to certain people. You want to not include other people. And I think being able to be more open on, but is this right for the business? Is this right for everyone else? Or is this just something that I want to do or I think is better? Is what I think one of the big things from being a designer and having to be like, I'm not gonna feel bad if someone doesn't like this exact design that I've made. It's nothing against me. They have a certain picture in their mind. I didn't get it, but that's not on me.
I work with a lot of small companies, and when they work with designers, a lot of times what I see them doing is using the designers as a proxy, almost like a therapist on their value proposition. Like, how am I going to come across to the market when they're trying to figure out how they even market what they have? As someone who's seen both sides, how would you recommend that the executive who may or may not realize what they're doing kind of approach that pixel pushing that is helpful and not just like therapy?
Yeah, I've definitely worked with plenty of non-designers at all levels. So we're not gonna point fingers at anyone that feel like if they don't have a point of view or if they don't ask the designer to make a change, that they have not done their job. Whereas I like to counsel, especially like my marketers, who again, many of them do not also have a design background. I have to counsel them on here is how you speak to a designer. And if you like what they've done, that's okay. Because they are the ones that should be coming back to you based on your brief or your question or your, I don't know, I like pink. What they think is best because they are the skilled one at this discipline. So if you don't really care and it comes back to you and you're like, I mean, I guess this is fine, you can trust that they have given you something that will work because they are the expert. So you can go, yeah, I love it. Let's go. Or maybe, hey, have you thought about this? Could we do this? And then when they come back and go, actually, we thought through that and we tried it, or that's a bad idea because X reasons, you can go, okay, great.
Yeah.
When you say that, I'm a watch guy, and I think it was Louis the 13th, King of France, had a watch made for him. And so the watchmaker brought it to him. As a king, he needs to find a flaw in this watch. And so it was Roman numerals around the dial. And he said the 4 was an IV. And he said the 4 should be 4 across, which is not correct Roman numerals.
No, not at all.
To this day, all fine watches that are Roman numerals have a 4 with 4 lines, not the IV, because this is argued about, because the king had to tell a designer something was wrong to fix it.
Wow, that is a great callback. And it's true. I mean, it's true outside of design too. And I'm sure that's now going to be a part of your world, right? It's like how do we make sure that cross-functional teams work together in such a way where we're not just throwing opinions out so that it looks like we had one, but actually just, being efficient and getting towards our desired outcome. But that probably is a bit of your world too.
I mean, I feel like always kind of has been through operations, through marketing. And I will say I've always kind of had a hybrid marketing ops role, even though it's not officially my role, just because I like to make things more efficient and quick and work better. So I'm just like, let's fix this. And the team's like, okay. But I think I see that over and over, right? Because product has a point of view. Leadership has a point of view. The designers have a point of view. UX has a point of view. Research has a point of view. Marketers have a point of view. Agency has a point of view. Everyone has a point of view. So I think it kind of makes it a little bit exciting, I think, for a designer when you have guardrails. Because not only can you push back and go, well, these are actually the guardrails, so we can't do that. But also I feel like it is able to focus your creativity so much better than being like, I don't know, do whatever you want. Because then where do you start? And then where do you end?
Yeah.
You need that kind of like bumper on the side to bump up against, to be like, oh, no, I shouldn't go over there. I can do this because it's right here.
Lindiwe said it best. Everyone has a point of view. The trick is having guardrails so the work doesn't turn into chaos. And honestly, that's the macro version of building in an AI world too. Pick your guardrails, pick your lane. So when we zoom out, if AI keeps accelerating how fast things get built and copied, what actually stays defensible? Cooper's answer comes right back to fundamentals. Pick a real problem, build a real advantage, and compound it through data and distribution.
So faster iteration of product market fit.
Exactly.
Rather than building the best product. You mentioned something earlier that is the obvious next question here, which is, how do you protect yourself against being overrun by the models? So one thing that Sam Altman says is, if you're building towards something that we're going to build, we're going to outpace you. Like if you're doing something that ChatGPT is already doing, you're going to be outpaced. And in the last couple of years, I've watched a bunch of my businesses run by my buddies struggle to remain relevant.
Yeah.
How do you protect yourself against the AI models over eclipsing you?
Yeah, so that's kind of core to our ethos of build products that solve real problems, not products that do something because AI can now do it. So inevitably, and again, in 5 years, who the heck knows? Anybody who says they know is kind of off their rocker. But at least for right now, if you pick a specific problem to go solve, there's a good likelihood that niche problem isn't going to go be the main focus in the crosshairs of an OpenAI, for example. So like the speed to lead, it's a big problem, but it's not $40 billion problem that OpenAI is going to go after. So you want to kind of if you pick a specific lane, that's kind of step one. Step two then is you actually have to get like a specific data advantage. So the more data and the more reps you get in a specific vertical or in a specific product, the better off you're going to be, because now you are the go-to tool to solve that problem. And I think this is really important because in the last little while, where the puck is going, not to get too high level on everything, but there's a world where very quickly in the next 1 year, maybe by the end of 2026, definitely in 2027, humans won't be using software tools as much anymore. It's going to be AI agents using software tools. So the reason why getting the data is so important is because if you can build your product to specifically do one thing really well, that is going to be a unique advantage that other agents, or when businesses start using AI agents more, they're going to want to give it the best tool for the job. And if you can be the best tool for the job because you've got the data advantage, that's how you really win. And then if you couple that on top of really focusing on distribution, you build this flywheel where the more people you bring on, the more feedback you get, the better you can make the product. The better you make the product, the better your data advantage is. The better your data advantage is, the stickier the product is. And the stickier the product is, and the more painful it is to remove from someone's workflow, the more it's going to stay locked in there no matter what kind of happens with other tools and other models. And if you kind of get that flywheel going, you can really build. Is anybody fully defensible? Who the heck knows? But at least if you can kind of get that concoction built in there, it's going to be a lot harder to rip it away from someone, because the example I give is just a really easy one. But so with the AI voice agent tool we have, if I have a business and I've got 5 AI voice agents set up that are all doing different tasks, and they know my business, they know all my data, they've done thousands of conversations and phone calls for me, so they're trained on everything I've got. Even if another model or even if another product comes out 6 months, a year from now, that is better. Like, it can just do more, it's faster, the voice sounds crisper, but it doesn't have that built-in history. I don't want to switch, because then I have to go retrain this new one on all my stuff, and it might take X amount of time for it to get there. So that's really where the advantages lie. And it really just comes down to the companies that move fast are the ones that are going to win. And I think if you're focused right now on trying to go raise a bunch of money, spend 6 months building, you're going to miss the boat in terms of how quickly you can actually get customer feedback and those advantages.
I'm curious about your take on something, because you mentioned that, if it's agent-led, that the best tool for the job is the winner.
Yeah.
But you also talked about the flywheel and the stickiness, which, lends itself to, tools that consolidate, where they handle several problems and it's baked in and it's one that your organization uses. So in this future world, call it a year out, even though no one can really speak to it, I would love to hear your theory there. Does it make sense for companies to continue to expand what they can tackle to make themselves stickier in more places for companies? Or are you suggesting that laser focus in one area is the way to be defensible in the future?
I would say the more specific you can be, the better. And I think again, not to get too deep into the weeds, but OpenAI is kind of given a little bit of a sliver into where their thought process is going on all of this. For anybody who's keeping up with the news, they opened up the ability for other companies to tie in an SDK and an API so that you can use the app inside of an OpenAI dashboard. So this is where the thinking that we have kind of goes, which is, all right, clearly OpenAI with this move is saying we're never going to have the same travel expertise that Expedia has. Like, we're just never going to build up that level of depth of expertise in how to book flights, hotels, and cars that Expedia has. So if we can use Expedia as a tool, therefore we win. So in Expedia's case, their best interest is to just absolutely dominate travel booking. In the case of, let's say, Atlas, this one phone product that we have, assuming that in the future, well, right now we can we'll be able to tie into OpenAI's ecosystem very quickly. But the play there is we don't need to go do a million things. What we just need to be very focused on is how can we just be the best phone service for these 5 specific kind of use cases. And if we can master that, then yes, everything will kind of consolidate into kind of some of these like bigger AI operating systems, so to speak. So like OpenAI, maybe it's Anthropic, maybe it's a Grok type scenario. Who knows? I think those guys are going to fight out a pretty bloody battle to figure out who wins that space. But whoever wins that space, they're gonna need and they're gonna have to rely on a lot of these tools to perform specific tasks as people start to use that one tool as kind of your main interface. So that's kind of the cleanest way to kind of wrap a bow on that thought process.
So across all of these conversations, the pattern is that fundamentals still win, and clarity is the thing that keeps you from getting pulled into the noise. Clarity on what you measure, what you prioritize, and what principles you won't trade away. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for a lot more insightful conversations in 2026 with the builders and growth leaders shaping what's next. Thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, please leave a review wherever you listen to this and share with someone trying to grow their career or their business. Until next time, keep growing.